If you want to watch an unbiased, objective analysis of Cyberpunk related content that isn't fueled by pure, raging hype, I suggest you just unsubscribe.
Not like you were even subscribed in the first place.
I'll just be honest with you, I'm way past the point of rationality with this game. Every time they show us new stuff, I experience an existential crisis, because I cannot believe I'm actually 2 months away from the opportunity to feel what it's like to live a less miserable life through a video game. If you've seen Night City Wire Episode 3, I think you can agree with me that saying that Night City looks incredible is a serious understatement. No, actually I don't think you can agree. You better agree, boy. This was by far my favorite episode so far, just because it showed so much of the most important character in this game. Night City. The city is the single thing I'm the most excited to experience in Cyberpunk 2077. If you watch my channel, you know I always spend way too much time talking about vibes. My favorite thing to do in games is to explore a well-crafted open world just for the sake of feeling immersed in the atmosphere. And it seems to me right now that Night City is going to feel unlike anything we've ever gotten to explore before. That's a big statement, I know, but I'm a small channel and no one will hold me accountable if I'm wrong. There's so much to take in with this episode. There's definitely been a huge graphical upgrade since the 2018 demo. Everything looks more polished and detailed. The lighting is much nicer, we got new waifu material, and Dum Dum had a glow up. But looking at the footage over and over again, I'm kinda realizing that it's more of a sensory overload type deal, rather than particular things I can go into detail about. It's not really my thing to deconstruct these frame by frame and tell you what every advertisement is for, and there's plenty of YouTubers already doing that. So I thought instead of analyzing the trailers and trying to think of new ways to say gorgeous for every new shot, I'd talk about a certain aspect of this presentation that stood out to me, which is the scale of Night City. This is by far the most we've seen of the city so far, and it's only now hitting me how large this world actually feels. The reason I want to compare it to The Witcher 3 is because, of course, they're made by the same studio, but also because someone from CDPR made a comment a while back saying that the map of Night City might even be a bit smaller than that of The Witcher 3, but is much more dense. Of course, the internet only heard the first part, and a lot of people still think that Cyberpunk is going to be small, so because I really passionately disagree with that, I want to talk about the few key concepts that I think will make Cyberpunk's world feel gigantic, possibly even multiple times bigger than The Witcher 3's, even if the overall map size is a bit smaller. Also, everyone likes to compare Cyberpunk to GTA 5, but I think that's kind of a dumb comparison to make when it comes to the worlds. GTA's world is notoriously empty and there's not much you can do in it, but the game came out 7 years ago, bro. It had the hardware limitations of previous gen consoles and was pretty impressive for the time, but Cyberpunk is looking to raise the bar that they set with The Witcher 3, which was already high above that of GTA 5. So you might be asking yourself, when is he gonna get to the actual point of the fucking video? And I wasn't gonna do it yet, but since you're such a whiny little spoiled bitch, these concepts of course intertwine with each other, but the main ones I'll be talking about are density, verticality, and scale. Let's start with density. CDPR have talked about density since they started marketing Cyberpunk, but I think that word by itself doesn't really mean much to idiots like me. Unless a map is insultingly devoid of any content and really stands out as empty, it's not always obvious just how much of a difference density actually makes, especially when you compare any two great games that both have well-crafted worlds. It's easier to just calculate the square kilometers and say that one game is bigger than the other, but just imagine how much more content you can pack into the same surface area for a city environment compared to a forest or field. Imagine just how much more time it takes to explore every building you can enter, NPC you can interact with, vendor you can shop from, and alleyway you can walk down. The way all these things make the world feel bigger is by making navigation slower. Imagine two games with the same map size, but one lets you zoom across it in a second, while the other one takes you an hour. You're gonna feel like the slower one was much bigger, right? Navigating through Night City is slower because it's filled with content slowing you down. Just moving through the city feels like an activity in itself. You'll never spend 5 minutes just holding W in the direction of your destination while you move through mostly empty fields and forests on horseback. I say mostly empty because even though the world of The Witcher 3 is filled with content, it makes sense that points of interest are more spread out in nature, which there is a lot more of in The Witcher, whereas a bustling city that makes up most of Cyberpunk's map offers the opportunity for new content every few steps. Sure, you can also use your car to zoom across that map in Cyberpunk, but I doubt you'll be able to fly over shit with your car GTA style, so being forced to stick to the roads will mean that you'll have to put just a bit more thought and time into your journeys. The distance you travel to get somewhere on roads will be larger than if you just followed a straight line to that same destination, like you usually can in The Witcher 3, which in turn again makes the map feel bigger. Night City also has the Badlands, which is a mostly empty area, but even though it's looking huge, when you take into account the percentage of the total map it takes up and assume that the total map is a bit smaller than The Witcher 3's, it's probably nowhere close to the total surface area that nature takes up in The Witcher 3. This is why square kilometers don't really matter. If you removed all the empty space from both games, I'm 100% positive that Cyberpunk's world would dwarf that of The Witcher 3. Don't get me wrong though, riding through nature as good looking as it is in The Witcher 3 is a very enjoyable experience in itself. I'm just talking strictly about the size of the world here. Let's talk about the verticality next. It's another thing often mentioned by the devs, but I have to say, after Night City Wire 3, I realized that I underestimated what it meant. I had the vision in my mind that verticality was basically mostly referring to the mega buildings, but looking at this footage and some of these screenshots, you can tell that the whole city is multi-layered. Miles Tost mentioned something in the Night City Wire 3 interview that pretty much sparked my idea for this video, which is that there are elevators that connect different layers of the city. He said that they are one of the many things you may stumble upon when exploring the alleyways of Night City, and that he's often surprised by where he pops up when he enters one of them. This is interesting because it means that this multi-layered ecosystem is not just like a few different floors of the same building, but the city can look completely different on different levels. He also said that the city structure is organic. It grew in phases and things were built on top of one another. This makes sense considering that Night City is overpopulated, and it's also exciting because it further suggests that these layers can feel different from one another as they were built in different periods. Miles also talked about the way you explore the city, which kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier. He said that you won't be able to just easily set out on a target in the distance, like for example when you see a castle on a hill somewhere in The Witcher 3 and just go there. This is likely mainly due to the verticality, which sounds so much more exciting to me now than it did before. I assume learning to navigate this concrete jungle is going to be a skill in itself, considering they've done a lot to help you with it. Every single street in Night City has a name. There are unique sub-districts within main districts, which also have slightly different visual styles while maintaining the overall aesthetic of the district. Each mega building has a unique color scheme to help you with navigation. All this complexity wasn't anywhere even close to present in The Witcher 3. Even though the overall map size might be smaller, I'm pretty confident that the overall surface area that you'll be able to walk on will be much bigger in Cyberpunk. Unless of course your Geraldo is proficient in parkour. So add all the explorable floors of all of the buildings, more enterable objects than in The Witcher 3, and different layers of the actual city together, and you get a lot of goddamn surface area.
That's quite big.
Finally, let's move on to the scale. The sheer number of giant objects around you creates this claustrophobic experience where you feel small and insignificant in comparison to the city. Novigrad is huge and impressive, but you never get this feeling quite as intense in The Witcher. This is because, of course, even the largest castle pales in comparison to any decently sized building, but also because Cyberpunk is in first person. It lets you look up and feel the almost evil and untouchable scale of these megastructures. The only other game that gives me a feeling like this is Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Catalyst doesn't even let you walk on the street, yet you still feel the size of the buildings you're on and those surrounding you. Its map is tiny compared to The Witcher 3, especially because you can only move across select buildings, yet it still feels overwhelmingly big because of the structures that dwarf you. By the way, my video on Mirror's Edge is the best and most underrated video I made, so if you haven't seen it, I'll put it at the end of this video so you can not watch it again. Thank you. So imagine sprinting in The Witcher 3. You can zip past a dozen small houses in seconds. Can you imagine doing the same in a world full of colossal skyscrapers? This doesn't in itself prove that the world is any bigger, because you could always say that there are just less buildings in total, but we've seen enough of the game to know that that's not true. There's just a lot less empty space. This, once again, makes you feel tiny, and therefore the world feel big. So kind of like real life, huh? Thank you so much for watching. For the real ones that made it this far, I thought about having a series when the game comes out where I just explore the city in a chill, sort of relaxed way and upload like longer videos of just roaming around, looking at all the detail and reacting to it. So let me know if you think that's a good idea and if you'd actually watch it. Anyway, sorry this video is so late. It took me a while to even figure out what I was trying to say. I made the script so convoluted because I suck at expressing my thoughts that it took me a couple of days just to make it make sense. And honestly, I'm still not sure if it does, but I hope you enjoyed either way. Drop me a subscribe if you didn't, because then you'll see my future videos and you can comment on all of them about how much you didn't enjoy.